Please listen carefully.
Hi, I work at the Center for Leadership in Global Sustainability. And I work with people from business and government and civil society that want to build their leadership chops and build capacity so that they can work on some of the big global challenges that they're facing. It's a fascinating job because I get to work with leaders and executives from around the world that are responding to some of the main global challenges. And my challenge today is to go from these global trends that I want to share with you and make them relevant to people in the audience and to Roanoke, because these global trends are reshaping professions and careers. It's certainly impacting communities around the world like Roanoke. This image on the screen behind me sort of captures this compilation of trends, some of the big changes that are occurring. And I'm going to get to some of the specifics in a minute. But what I want you to see is the scale and scope of change that's occurring. Just about any indicator that you measure is starting to accelerate dramatically. In fact, the inflection point, the point where they all start to go up, is amazingly similar. It's somewhere in the 1950s where things start to scale up. And it's accelerating so fast that we're creating a new world, a very complex, a very uncertain world, and there's a lot of concern and opportunity about those changes. So we're familiar with a lot of these changes. I just want to share a couple of them with you. There are more of us, certainly. We're moving towards 8 billion people soon. We're using more energy. We're using more water. Again, you can see it going up right around 1950. We're using more fertilizer to grow more food. The atmosphere has more carbon in it. The oceans have more acid in it. The marine fisheries are probably the only curve that's not following this trend. They're starting to tail down a bit, in part because we've overfished the fisheries. There aren't many left. Forests are being cut down, on and on and on. Any social or environmental trend is following that same arc. We are creating a new world. It is the Anthropocene, the time of humans. And these folks that I'm working with around the world are seeing great opportunity and great challenge in the uncertainty and change that's occurring, and there are lessons for all of us. What's accelerating? There are like three big feet on the accelerator, or three huge accelerators. One is connectivity. We are a more connected people than ever before. Money, capital moves around the world incredibly quickly. It's not restricted by nations or monetary denominations. It goes to wherever it can create the most return on investment. Information is moving around the world. It's not just tweets and Facebook pages, but it's the LinkedIn networks, and especially for people in this room, it's the knowledge networks, the global knowledge networks that we all belong to, so that developments in our profession somewhere else around the world are shared very quickly and bringing us all up to speed so that we all are using best practices. So there's a tremendous increase in sharing information and knowledge. The supply chains, the things that bring us all the goods and services that we crave. The jeans that I'm wearing were probably made from cotton that was grown in Arkansas, because that's where we subsidize water, and that was shipped to China to be turned into denim, because that's where they subsidize textiles, and that was then sent to Vietnam to be sewn into the jeans that I'm wearing, because that's where labor is cheap, and then somehow it made it back to the U.S. in some big Amazon warehouse, and when I clicked the button to buy, the UPS delivered it to my mailbox. What's amazing is that the things that we wear and use and depend on and eat are interconnected and interdependent by these large, long, complex supply chains. Utilities, the waterways, the gas pipelines, the roadways, the rivers, the power, are crossing boundaries more. There are more corridors that transmit utilities that cross boundaries than there are boundaries now. We're increasingly connected by all these things, and certainly immigration is a huge political issue today, but people are moving legally and illegally around the world. So we are much more connected, and that's accelerating us forward. The second big driver, the second big accelerant is prosperity. This is remarkable. Within the next several decades, we are set to welcome in 2 to 3 billion middle-class consumers. That's B with a billion, middle-class consumers. Much of that is happening in Asia, China, India, Indonesia. And that's a terrific accomplishment, ending poverty, ending malnutrition, bringing in people that are concerned about educating their children, concerned about good governance and transparency. It also has huge implications for geopolitics. Where are the big budgets? Where are businesses going to locate? How is geopower, soft power and hard power and military power relocated? But along with prosperity comes health. We're healthier, we're taller, we're living longer, and perhaps most importantly, we're better educated. Literacy is global. People are going to universities, and so we're creating tremendous social capital. We're creating people who can solve problems, new Mozarts and Einsteins and Elon Musks, to solve the problems and create the beauty that we will cherish and use in the future. So we're ever more connected, we're ever more prosperous, and of course, we're ever more innovative. This is where it starts to get a little spooky in the sense that the hardware and software and wetware innovations are starting to scare people, and we're seeing some political resistance to it, but clearly our computational power, the so-called Moore's Law, the doubling of hardware capacity every couple years, was possible on mainframes a decade ago, and that, of course, is more powerful than what landed us on the moon. And the next few doublings are going to be tremendous. But the real advances are in the software and the algorithms and the artificial intelligence. It's in the news. We now have cars that can drive better than people can drive. We have bots that can teach better than professors can teach, and we have doctors. We have Watson, IBM's Watson, that can diagnose cancer better than medical professionals. And then wetware, the genetic engineering, the ability to create new life to meet our material needs and our energy needs and our security needs. This is one that we really don't understand, but the potential is fantastic, that we are really on the cusp of dramatic change that we can't really foresee. So all these changes are creating sort of a new industrial revolution, a new efficiency, a new world. The first couple industrial revolutions were all about using fossil fuels and machines to make people more powerful, so that one person on a bulldozer could do more in an hour than 100 people could do in weeks. Now we've always needed the driver of the bulldozer, but now with artificial intelligence and maybe wetware, we don't need that anymore. So it's much more efficient, much more growth. Okay, so we know we're moving forward, right? We are accelerating fast into the future. You can feel the momentum. It's just pressure going forward. 3 big accelerators: connectivity, prosperity, and all this innovation. But where are we going? How do we steer? What do we need to avoid? What do we need to capture in order to sustain development? The folks that I work with are seeing on the horizon some major obstacles very clearly and increasingly nearer to us, things that have to be navigated in order to avoid serious economic and social disruption. The broad outlines are clear. The specifics on some of these are also quite clear. Others are a little bit hazy. I'll just share a few of them with you. Climate change, of course, is probably the most familiar in the news. We have to somehow keep the climate from warming more than 2 degrees is the magic number, and that's a magic number because of beyond 2 degrees, things get really weird. They start to become expensive. Cities start to flood, and that's expensive. Infrastructure starts to decay, that's expensive. Food systems start to be disruptive, disrupted, agriculture becomes disrupted, that's expensive. If you go to 4 degrees, it becomes super expensive. So we need to keep it below 2 degrees, okay? The thing is that most of us use fossil fuels and that emit the carbon, the greenhouse gases that cause these problems, and we have to welcome 2 to 3 billion new middle-class consumers who are going to want the phones, the toasters, the refrigerators, the washing machines, the Prius hybrids. They're going to want the same energy lifestyle that we have. So we've got to, in essence, double the amount of energy in the next 20 or 30 years. And we have to do it in a way that doesn't emit greenhouse gases. That is a major, major challenge. Food, likewise, because there are 2 or 3 billion new middle-class consumers who are going to eat better, eat higher on the food chain, eat more meat, we need to almost double the amount of food that's consumed over the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. And that, too, is a dramatic challenge because we really hammer the biosphere now with our agriculture. It's the biggest impact we have. We, in essence, use all of Africa and all of the equivalent of South America. 2 whole continents are in farm, that amount scattered around the world. We use just about every piece of land that can be used for agriculture. The rest of it's urban or desert or mountain or in wilderness or places where biodiversity thrives. It's really hard to think of how we're going to double the amount of food that's consumed. Water is in between climate and climate and food for a very strategic reason. We use maybe 70% of our fresh water supplies to grow food. It's the biggest use of our water. We use probably 20% of our water to make our energy. Energy is also very water intensive, and we have to double the amount of energy, and we have to double the amount of agriculture. So that's going to put some serious stress on water. Water is already constraining many communities. Many of their growth and economic potential is being constrained by water shortages. Aquifers around the world are dropping. So under the major breadbaskets, like in the Midwest in the U.S., similarly in China and India, the aquifers, where the water's pumped to irrigate our food, is dropping by dozens of feet every year. We are pumping out fossil water that's not being replenished. Serious challenges. So we've got to figure out these issues. Urbanization, likewise, we're going to, in essence, double the amount of people that live in urban areas. It's like 1 million people a week that are moving into cities around the world. It's really spectacular. We are, as a species, 50% urban or so. We crossed that threshold about maybe a decade or so ago. Projections are that we'll be 75% urban as a species by 2050 or so. People move into cities because that's where the jobs are, the opportunities, the education, the health. That's where they find mates and good time. People have been moving into cities ever since the birth of agriculture. And we're continuing. We'll be 75% urban. What that means is between now and 2050 or 2060 or 2070, we're going to have to double everything we've built between the beginning of time and now. That's a lot of urban infrastructure. Just one sort of startling statistic that I think is true is that China, which has been urbanizing quite rapidly, used more concrete in the first decade of the 21st century, used more concrete in that one decade than the U.S. used in all of the 20th century. We did a lot of building in the 20th century, a lot of roads and buildings, and Roanoke is an example of that. So the material demands are enormous. And urbanization is a good thing for sustainable development. We also have to navigate all these other challenges. The least well-known, maybe the most disruptive, is down there in the lower corner, the inequity. We can feel some of the challenges of disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Globally, those disparities are getting erased as we're ending poverty and wealth is spreading, and the rising tide is lifting all boats, is lifting countries, but the disparity within countries is increasing, and we certainly can see some of the impacts of that disparity in local and national politics. So how are people responding? There are lots of really cool responses that are happening around the world. And I just want to share the space where I work, which is in this collaboration between government, business, and civil society. And this is where some of the biggest innovations are occurring. The institutions that we've used in the past to solve problems, like national governments and single businesses and NGOs, they worked in the 20th century. They worked when things were stable and problems were small, but they're not very effective with these big global interconnected challenges that we face. And so what's happening is new institutions are being created with these partnerships. And this is where the real potential exists for professionals and communities to make great gains. It's not just all governments. Some governments are still pretty ineffective. National governments around the world are ineffective as maybe our national government, paralyzed and polarized. But cities are incredibly responsive. Mayors have to get the snow removed and the trash out. They are responding to climate challenges. They're responding to water issues. They're responding to food security issues. Cities are amazingly nimble and politically capable to government actors, and they're really stepping up on all these challenges, and they're doing it in partnership with business. Business might be the most surprising partner here, and if we look at the audience and we look at this target here, that a target audience for this group, it's probably the most absent, but it's probably the biggest player and the most important player. Multinational corporations, of course, have sort of more money than many countries. They're huge. And so they can buy the very best science that money can buy. I mean, they know about all these trends. They know about these challenges, these choke points, these obstacles that have to be navigated, and they are responding in very strategic ways. It's not just because they want green customers. They do, but there's not a whole lot of money to be made in green, niche, sustainable products. They more want green, they want to recruit and retain good employees, because that's where the work gets done, and increasingly the millennials and others want to work at places where that have good sustainability missions. But more importantly, companies are responding because capital, money, stock market investments, insurance investments, pension funds are investing with strings attached. They're being very sensitive to the sustainability portfolio of these big companies. And study after study shows that the companies that have the best sustainability programs, that are responding to these trends and concerns and risks that I'm sharing with you, they're outperforming their peers. And so any company that wants capital is increasingly going this way. But most importantly, they're responding because of supply chain risks. Those long, taut supply chains that wrap around the world multiple times, that bring us our jeans and phones and widgets, they are at risk from disruption from climate and water and inequity and social unrest. And supply chains are the lifeblood of a corporation. And if they get disrupted, they risk losing brand, they risk losing market share. And so companies are incredibly sensitive to these issues, and partnering with cities and government, and certainly with NGOs, with civil society organizations such as the local groups here represented here, but also international groups that are trying to respond to the same set of changes and risks and opportunities. So to close, in summary, I just want to wrap up and share with you the story, narrative arc, if you will, that I presented. One is that we live in the time of the Great Acceleration. Right? There is enormous change afoot. We are recreating not just the economy and the political situation, but also the ecology of Earth. And it's a time of great uncertainty. We do not know if the tools and methods and things that we've used to provide our security and food in the 20th century will work in the 21st century. There's a great deal of uncertainty. There are three big drivers, three big feet on the accelerator. There's all this growth in connectivity, increasing prosperity, health, and education, and then the innovation, the hardware, software, and wetware. And that's creating the need to navigate through these choke points, through these obstacles that are on the horizon. We can see them, and if we don't navigate them, it is seriously disruptive to our economy and society. And one of the key ways that people are responding is through new partnerships, particularly cross-sector partnerships. And so as a group, as a community concerned about Virginia, let's get busy. Lots to do. Thank you.